Alright, all you glorious gamers out there, welcome to the PlayerStoo Podcast, the video game podcast for gamers like you, by gamers like you. You can find PlayerStoo on all the social media, that's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayerStoo.com, that's PlayerStoo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, that really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. And while you're over there, if you could leave us a little review as well, again, it just helps us out even more. And thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. It genuinely does mean a lot. Alright, and on with the show. My name is Mark Henderson. With me, as always, Mr. Lewis Gamley. How's it going, Lewis?
Going very well, Mark. Good to see you as always. How are you getting on just now?
Not bad. Played some video games, had a wee bit of time this week.
Oh, nice, good.
Firing into Persona 5. In fact, we might as well start there, Lewis. Normally I ask you first, but I've just decided to co-op this bit. So
you've jumped the shark.
Absolutely have, Lewis. Absolutely have. I've continued to play Persona 5. I'm now over 90 hours in. I think I'm in the home stretch, but again, I don't really know. Yep, still the same game.
Still enjoying it at 90 hours though.
I am actually still enjoying
question.
it, yeah. I am, and I think that's probably a credit to a good game and a good story that I am still enjoying it at 90 hours in, you know. I have also still been playing Super Mario 3D World, and it has also continued to be just absolutely joyous and so fun. Hellishly frustrating at some moments, as is every Mario game, I think, but just fantastic, just really good. I cannot wait for you specifically to get your hands on it, Lewis, because I know for a fact you're going to fucking love it.
I have to agree with that. I am very much looking forward to it. Yeah, everything that you've told me, you know, off air and in text and stuff about it have just made me even more excited to it. And I just really want to see Bowser's Fury as well. There's so much chat about that mode at the moment and what it might represent for Nintendo, and I just want to see it and have a go at it, you know.
Yeah, I've still not played that, actually. I tell you what, for next week, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm saying this out loud, I will try and play that for next week's podcast so that I can talk about that a little bit. So there you go.
Sounds
not
good.
Just Persona over and over again. It's nearly over, I swear. But Lewis, what have you been playing this week?
Well, Mark, just more Blasphemous, really. I've been making kind of slow but steady progress with that all this week. I've not had a ton of gaming time, but I did have a couple of pretty decent sessions with that, and I think I'm now about halfway through. It's always quite hard to tell in Metroidvania games quite how much there is lying ahead of you. You know, there can be so much backtracking. And obviously as well, if anyone doesn't know this about Blasphemous, as much as it's a Metroidvania, it also has kind of Souls elements to it. It's got quite challenging fights, it has pretty substantial boss battles and that kind of thing, so there's obviously those things that might slow me down a bit, but I would say around halfway through, and I'm still really enjoying it. It doesn't have anything like the depth of Hollow Knight. I spoke a little bit last week about comparing it in a gameplay sense to Hollow Knight and how it is maybe a little unfavourable there. It's just not as kind of rich and deep and textured as Hollow Knight is. I'm going to keep using that as my Metroidvania example because it is the most recent and the best one I've ever played. I would say for anyone who's like looking for a Metroidvania, particularly if you're at all intrigued by the art style of Blasphemous, which is what really drew me to it, was this odd sort of twisted Christianity thing that's going on. It's very heavily referencing aspects of Catholicism, in particular Spanish Catholicism.
Yeah, the art style is incredibly dark and it's sort of metal looking, right?
Yeah, I keep grabbing screenshots of it on my Switch, and I stuck a couple just on our Instagram stories the other day just because there's so many moments where you just enter a room and when it loads back in, you're just like, what the fuck is that? Like, what am I looking at here? And what is this going to be, a boss fight or is this an NPC? You know, there's at one point you enter a room and there's just a giant guy with a face growing on his chest, and it's a sort of Dorian Gray situation. And I just stood looking at him for ages, going like, what the fuck is this going to be? And I spoke to him, and it ended up being like an NPC quest. But if he had stood up and started swinging something at me, I would not have been in the least surprised. You know, everything in this game towers over you. Everything is weird and kind of a bit gross and inexplicable, basically. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it. Combat is good fun. To be honest, and I said this last week, and I expected that a lot more of the things like the spells that you can unlock and some of the other skills and techniques would come into play more, but to be honest, a lot of that doesn't come into it to a great deal. Like, it is very much just a go about swinging your sword a lot of the time. So far, at least. Maybe that will change quite drastically because there are a lot of slots and there does seem to be a lot of things to find. But in terms of just going around, exploring this world, hacking and slashing, trying not to die too much and enjoying the different environments, it's been great so far, yeah.
Nice one, man. A wee bit disappointing to hear that those elements of the game aren't affecting gameplay, because obviously the charm system in Hollow Knight, and sorry to continually be comparing this game to Hollow Knight, is just a very easy go-to for the both of us, I guess. But the charm system did quite drastically change the way, or could quite drastically change the way that you played Hollow Knight, you know? So it would have been good to see that in Blasphemous as well. But again, I quite genuinely think Hollow Knight's one of the best video games ever made, so if it's not quite at that level, I can forgive it for that.
Exactly that, yeah. It's not getting anything particularly wrong, yeah. It just hasn't fleshed out. It hasn't made me need any of that stuff, which I think is a very common problem in video games generally, so all good.
Nice one, man. Alright, Lewis, time for the news. Alright, Lewis, news item number 1. There has been a PlayStation State of Play this week. Hurrah! It's been quite a while since we've had one of these.
Yep.
It opened with Crash Bandicoot 4, which is coming to the PlayStation 5, with the standard slew of upgrades. The nice thing about this was that it was adopting the adaptive triggers and the PlayStation card system, you know, and it's just nice to see a third party really embrace those PlayStation 5 features, you know. This upgrade will be coming on March the 12th, and there will be a free PlayStation 5 upgrade to anyone that owns it on the PlayStation 4.
Yeah, great to see this getting that upgrade treatment, getting all the bells and whistles on PS5. I think it'll be a really interesting thing, particularly to see how the haptics and the triggers have been used, because obviously Sackboy has set the bar high there.
Absolutely, yeah. The new PlayStation mascot. Alright, after that was Returnal. We got a good look at gameplay this time round. We have seen bits of gameplay here and there, but it's been more flashes, whereas this was a bit more sustained look at the gameplay, which looked pretty fucking intense, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Obviously, the game has rogue-like or rogue-lite elements, procedurally generated maps, and coming back after dying again and again and again, and that is kind of how you make progress through the game. Returnal is coming on April the 30th. I thought it looked pretty good, Lewis.
Yeah, I think it really does. I keep shuttling around on this game between being quite excited for it and then being a bit apprehensive. And the trailer, to be honest, like, I'm still in that place, because there's elements of the action, of the gunplay, that just really kind of aren't my cup of tea necessarily. But the world, the setting, the atmosphere of it, I mean, it has real kind of dystopian space alien vibes about it that I'm kind of really drawn to, and I want to know. I basically kind of want to get hands-on and just feel what that combat feels like. There was a moment a couple of years ago, Mark, where we saw a proper gameplay trailer for Control, and I took a step back at that point and went, oh god, this is quite intense, almost bullet hell kind of action at times, and that's sort of what I'm getting here again. In Control, there was elements of that I did really like when I got hands-on with it, and I'm sure the same will be the case here. But I just want more. I want to see more. I want to feel more. I would love to see a demo of this, but I don't imagine we're getting one.
Ha! From PlayStation? Absolutely not, Liz. It's an interesting comparison you draw, though, between Control, because I actually see that. I actually see a lot of Control in it now that you've said that in terms of its combat. I think the enemy types are probably quite different, because if you're fighting fairly intense, massive monsters that fire a hell of a lot of bullets at you all at one time. But in terms of like how the player controls, I can definitely see that. I actually think that the combat sort of sold me on it, to be honest with you. I was a wee bit easy-ozy. It was more the roguelike elements of it that definitely. I was having problems with. But in terms of combat, I think it was great.
Good.
After that was Knockout City. This is the dodgeball battle royale game. We actually saw this on the latest Nintendo Direct as well, and there will be a cross-play beta coming for that as well. If you're interested, you should go and check that out. Using physical paper again, ladies and gentlemen, in case you can hear that on the microphone. After that list was Sifu. This was a new game announcement by Slowclap, and it's basically a kung fu game with an over-the-shoulder camera, but it's also like a Streets of Rage beat-em-up almost. It's coming in 2021, and also looked as if it had roguelike elements as well, when if you died, you seem to wake up older, suggesting that you can't just keep dying and dying and dying and dying and dying, because eventually you will die of being an old man, I assume. But yeah, you were quite interested in this, weren't you? Yeah,
it just caught my eye as one that felt a little bit different from other games that we were seeing here. I mean, it looks like it might be quite a smallish game, from potentially quite a small team, but yeah, something about the brawler action just caught my eye. I'm keen to see a little bit more of it, and just good to get a new game announced as well.
Yeah, definitely. After that, Lewis, was Solar Ash, this by Heart Machine of Hyperlight Drifter fame. We got to see a good amount of gameplay in this one as well. Clearly the game very heavily focuses on movement as its main mechanic. It looks a lot like the Pathless, to be completely honest, and I wonder if the people over at Heart Machine saw that game come out and thought, oh, for fuck's sake, we're doing such a similar thing to this, you know? I think that even more movement focused and more exploration focused, whereas this seems to be, or at least have a lot more combat elements, and that is coming out in 2021 as well.
Yeah, as you say, very similar to the Pathless, which really works for me. I played the Pathless a couple months ago, really enjoyed it. I like the idea that we're going to get more of these games that are obviously lifting something from Breath of the Wild, but putting their own spin on it, you know, really looking at making movement and motion and traversal be the fun part of the game, which, you know, we saw working to such great effect in things like Spider-Man. So I'm all up for that. Adding in some combat, the beautiful art style of it, which, you know, very visually links it to Hyperlight Drifter as well. It's all set in the same universe, as they have said themselves. So I'm really keen on this. I'm waiting to see more, but it looks real good.
After that, Lewis, Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach. It basically looked like a horror game. I don't really know what to say. I never thought that this was a particularly good showing of what the game was going to be. It's coming out in 2021. I'm sure if you're interested in horror games, you know more about this game than I do. After that, Lewis, was Oddworld Soulstorm. Yes!
Yes, indeed.
We're going to see a good amount of gameplay here again. It just looks like a bigger, more dynamic version of the original game, basically, but still maintaining that heart and soul that the original game had. You know what I mean? There's so much of the original game in it, and I love that. It's coming on April the 6th, which is so soon, Lewis. It's absolutely fantastic. And it seems as though you will get it for free on your PlayStation Plus subscription in April if you have a PlayStation 5, which is just fantastic as well.
Yeah, that is such an incredible offer. It almost seems too good to be true.
I can't believe I don't need to pay for this game.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, this has been one of my most anticipated games coming into the new generation. I've been waiting for this game for years. You know, I don't know how many times we've said that we're massive Oddworld fans from way back when we were kids. To see Abe's Exodus kind of be blown up in this way to what this is, this kind of spiritual remake of the second Oddworld game from way back when, I just think it looks stunning. It looks so deep and rich. It looks like it's brought in so many modern gameplay elements, you know, that it would probably feel quite small and lacking without. I cannot wait to play it, and the fact that, as you say, we don't have to pay. It's coming day and day on to PS Plus for those of us lucky enough to have PS5s, it should be said. But if you've got one and if you've never played Oddworld, give this a go. Like, you will not regret it, I don't think.
I'm really looking forward to it as well. It looks so fucking good. Like, even just visually, just fantastic. After that, Lewis, was Kena Bridge of Spirits, this by Ember Labs. It just looks stunningly beautiful, like a Pixar movie, doesn't it? It looks ridiculously like a Pixar movie. The best thing about this trailer was also that we got to see a lot of gameplay, and specifically we got to see a good bit of combat, which I thought looked great. Honestly, I thought this game looked really, really good. And we also have a release date now, which is August the 24th, which is a bit later than I was hoping for, but even still, game looks great, and if it's coming this year, thumbs up from me.
Yeah, absolutely. This trailer really kind of moved my position on Kena because I'd been a bit lukewarm on it. I thought it looked nice. Obviously, it does look nice, but getting a bit of the look of the action and the combat and the gameplay here, it just made me think, like, actually, yeah, this looks really interesting, really like something that is worth checking out. I can't wait for more. And it just feels like a perfect, you know, an August game, a summer game. It bookends a nice summer with Ratchet & Clank coming out in June at the start of it all. It's going to be a good summer of games.
Yeah, man, I'm really looking forward to it. I've got to say, the more and more I see this game, the more and more I'm excited for it, honestly. Next up was Deathloop, and it was basically just more gameplay of Deathloop. To be honest with you, I thought that this felt a little bit out of place here, because it was more gameplay of a game that we've already seen a lot of gameplay from, and everything else felt as if it was something new. Either we were getting a release date, or we were getting like a lot of gameplay that we hadn't seen before, and we already know the release date is going to be May the 21st for Deathloop as well. I don't really know why this was here, but if you want to go and see more Deathloop gameplay, you can. And after that, the last announcement was a Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate. And this was basically announcing a PlayStation 5 upgrade of Final Fantasy VII Remake and DLC, which stars Yuffie, who was a playable character in the original Final Fantasy VII, but not in the Midgar section. It seems as though the story of the DLC takes place concurrently with the main game as well. This is all coming out on June the 10th, and there will be a free upgrade to the PlayStation 5. Your save data will be carried across and all that, but you will not get an upgrade to the PS5 version of Final Fantasy VII Remake if you get the version that is free on PSN right now. E.g., you have to have bought the game. You have to have bought the game to get the free PlayStation 5 upgrade. There was also 2 more announcements by Square Enix off the back of this, 2 mobile games. Final Fantasy VII The First Soldier, which is a Final Fantasy VII Battle Royale game. There's no easy way to say that. But what I will say is that it doesn't look anywhere near as shit as I thought it might look. It doesn't look good. It doesn't look good, but it doesn't look as bad as I thought it might. Apparently it's set pre-Final Fantasy VII, and that is coming out in 2021 at some point if you're interested. The game after that, however, is far, far, far more interesting to me anyway, and that is Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis, which is a compilation of the original Final Fantasy VII, Advent Children, Before Crisis, Crisis Core, and Dirge of Cerberus. The game will apparently feature the events of all of these games combined with an original story exploring the origins of Soldier, and this will be coming out in 2021, which I think is really, really cool. So, Lewis, thoughts on all the Final Fantasy VII stuff? I thought it was all fantastic.
I'm stunned, Mike. Yeah, I thought it was great. It was good to see some new content coming to that game. To be honest, I had no expectation of that, really. We've talked about in the past about, these various trademarks and things that were getting registered at different points, and it was rumoured that could be the sequel, and who really knew what was coming. But I think to take together both a PS5 upgrade, which they could have just done that, and that would have been enough for some people, but to add in a new chapter, new playable characters, something that still resonates with fans of the original, it's still hitting those nostalgia beats. It's exactly the kind of content that's going to bring someone like you back to play more. Whereas
it 100% is, to confirm. It absolutely is.
If it had just been, an entirely new piece of writing, maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't have it, because it then becomes about your relationship to the new game rather than the original game. So I think they're doing it in a really smart way. It would be great if everyone could get the PS Plus version and get the upgrade, but, fair enough, really. You should have to spend some money, perhaps, to get the PS5 upgrade on that. I think that side of things was great. The mobile game side, that feels to me like going down the rabbit hole a little bit. I think the Battle Royale thing,
it's a bizarre announcement, isn't it? Let's be honest.
Fair play. And I'm like, you could imagine that a general overall Final Fantasy Battle Royale could work quite nicely. There's so many characters, there's so many situations there that you could play around with. But it might be quite specialist in the way that recent Resident Evil Battle Royale looking thing that got announced. You have to be really invested in a series to want to play a Battle Royale that's very specific to one franchise, But Ever Crisis, I think that could be a bit of a sleeper hit, because if that is doing what it sounds like it's doing, which is kind of just telling the full expanded story of Final Fantasy VII, and including all the spin-offs and extras that it's had over the years.
Yeah, I think that is what it's doing.
If it's doing that in quite a condensed form, I heard someone else describe it as basically like the highlights of those stories.
I heard it being called an abridged version, I think we're saying
something
the same
along
thing.
that. I think that's great, and that might again work for then someone like me who hasn't really invested that much in the original, but may want to, may fall in love with the new game, the remake, and think, well, actually, I want to get to grips with this, and that might be a good place to start. So it's great stuff. The one caveat I have to it is it's a lot of games to be making without any roadmap for when the next part of the remake is actually going to come, but fair enough,
Well, what I will say to that is I wouldn't be expecting Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 for quite a while.
No, me either.
Thoughts on the show generally, Lewis?
I thought it was fine, to be honest. I wasn't...
Yeah, that's sort of my overarching opinion. It was alright.
I wasn't blown away by anything. Saw some more of some games that I was already interested in. That's about it,
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Everything from this showcase that I am interested in, I was interested in before the showcase, if that makes sense, But overall, it was basically fine.
Yeah.
Alright, Lewis, news item number 2. Pokemon did indeed have a presentation this week as well. We spoke about the fact that there was rumours and whatever last week, but It did actually happen, so we didn't sound like total dicks. Cutting right to the chase here, Lewis. They have announced the Diamond and Pearl remakes, which had previously leaked. They will be called Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. They'll be coming out in late 2021, almost certainly in the run-up to Christmas, I would have thought. The Pokemon Company has said the scale of the original games, towns, routes has been preserved. However, they have updated the aesthetic, and I think because they've updated this aesthetic to look sort of a bit more cutesy, a bit more let's go, but they've kept the scale the same as the original games, it gives a very chibi sort of vibe to the character models. It's not massively appealing to me, but at the same time, the amount of backlash that it got, it did not deserve that either. Like, it's basically fine. This game will also be getting made by Ilka, who apparently worked on Pokemon Home, because Game Freak are working on a new Pokemon game called Pokemon Legends Arceus, which is the first truly open-world Pokemon game, and it is the fabled Pokemon Breath of the Wild, Lewis. This has also been dubbed a, quotes, pre-make, as it is set in the same Sinnoh region as Diamond and Pearl and will be coming out in early 2022. I actually think that this game is interesting for a couple of reasons. One, because it is open world, hopefully taking a lot of cues from Breath of the Wild. And secondly, because it's been set in a totally different time. A lot of the aesthetics that it was going for looks like sort of feudal Japan, or certainly like old school Japan, we will say. You know, yeah. I think any point in Japanese history that just looks old, the West just say that must be feudal Japan. Yeah. You know what I mean? I just don't know enough about Japanese history. But you get the sort of vibe that I'm going for. And Lewis, those Pokeballs that they showed off, that I was going mad about on our social media, they look so fucking cool. They look so cool. I really like this presentation.
Yeah, it was nice and felt quite rare to me to hear some positivity coming out of a Pokemon fan towards something that had just been announced, and I got all these...
There was a lot of negativity as
well.
I
know there was on mine. I opened my text and saw all these messages from you that seemed genuinely excited, and then, yeah, honestly, from an outsider's perspective on Pokemon, I don't play it. I haven't played it since I was about 8 years old, so I'm sure that some of those fans who had vitriolic reactions to it are justified in some senses, or they feel justified, you know, whatever. To me, I think that that chibi style isn't really working for me either, but I don't find it offensive.
It's totally fine, Liz.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah, you're getting the remakes of these games that you love. So, I mean, the look of Pokemon has never really been anywhere close to the main thing about it in terms of the games, you know, like, it's there, but it's not key in any sense, so... But yeah, to me, the much more exciting thing is this new game, this open world thing. I mean, it's what people like yourself have been calling for a long time. I mean, does it look like the game that you want? I was concerned looking at it that the performance looked a little bit ropey. And I don't know, you said to me it might feel a little bit more like the wild areas from Sword and Shield. And I just wonder, like, is that what you would want? Were those good to play? I can't even remember us talking about it too much.
They were... fine. Is it the game I want it to be? Like, almost certainly not, is what I will say. Does that mean it will be a bad game? No. I honestly don't know what this game is going to turn out to be. This game could quite easily turn out to be shit, and I'm perfectly willing to say that. However, it is a step in the right direction. Even if this one is shit, maybe 2 down the line is amazing. That's why I wanted to see this, because down the line, at some point, we could be looking at something really special, you know?
Yeah, and I could imagine that this is a bit of a test for that then, you know? That's why it may be set in the sort of historic period that we've not seen in Pokemon before, so that they can divorce it from the main games, and in a few years' time they do put out the next proper mainline canon Pokemon game in the series, and it is in that style when they've probably requiring a Switch Pro to run as well as possible. But I think that is quite exciting.
Yeah, me too. Alright, Lewis, news item number 3. BioWare have announced that they will no longer be working on Anthem Next, making this the final nail in the coffin for Anthem, Lewis. The news comes almost exactly 2 years to the day after Anthem was released. BioWare have made this statement regarding the cancellation.
In the spirit of transparency and closure, we wanted to share that we've made the difficult decision to stop our new development work on Anthem, aka Anthem Next. We will, however, continue to keep the Anthem Live service running as it exists today. Since Anthem's launch, the team has been working hard to continually improve the game, releasing multiple updates that brought with them a variety of improvements and introduced new content to play. Towards the end of 2019, we expanded on that effort and started working on a more fundamental restructure of the game. During the development, we've provided updates revealing some of the team's work through blog posts and conversations with you on social media, and it's been inspiring for us to see the positive reactions and feedback. I've been incredibly proud of the work the team has been doing and excited to see and play each new build of the experience. 2020 was a year unlike any other, however, and while we continue to make progress against all our game projects at BioWare, working from home during the pandemic has had an impact on our productivity, and not everything we had planned as a studio before COVID-19 can be accomplished without putting undue stress on our teams. I know this will be disappointing to the community of Anthem players who have been excited to see the improvements we've been working on. It's also disappointing for the team who are doing brilliant work. And for me personally, Anthem is what brought me to BioWare, and the last 2 years have been some of the most challenging and rewarding experiences of my career.
Quite a long one there, but I think that covers the situation quite well.
Yeah.
I mean, this will be forever a totem of one of the worst launches in video game history. A launch of a service game that absolutely ruined what was actually a really great concept, and I will stand by that. I think that the concept of Anthem was incredible. It was basically Iron Man, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, video games like to call upon No Man's Sky and Rainbow Six Siege as these amazing service comeback stories, but this is the other side of that coin completely, you know? And if it hadn't been for Cyberpunk 2077 most recently, Lewis, I think that we could easily say that Anthem was one of, if not the worst launches of a video game ever, and unfortunately it looks like this will be the end of it forever, and don't know how long those servers are going to last for.
No, I mean, I have no idea if there are any players at the moment or how many players there would be. To be honest, yeah, I feel really sorry for people who'd stuck by this game over the last 2 years and were waiting to see what could come from it.
Totally, man.
And
totally.
Sorry for the developers too. As much as it wasn't the game that any of us wanted, or surely that they had hoped to put out, they've still been putting work in, and it sounds like there was at least a small team of people working on it over the last few months for this update, and it's just not panned out. You've got to wonder how big an impact COVID has had on all that, just on the resources of the whole team at BioWare. But as you say, Mark, it was a total fucking disaster at the start, and I just think we do talk about No Man's Sky particularly a lot in terms of these big turnaround stories, but it is becoming clear that that is still very rare. You know, it is not easy to just launch a game and turn it around. That can't be the model. It can't be that you put out your game expecting that you'll then save it. You know, it has not worked in this case.
It certainly has not. I think that the writing has been on the wall for Anthem since BioWare announced that they'd moved the vast majority of their development team over to Dragon Age 4 and left, like, I can't remember exactly what the quote was, but like a small dedicated team or something like that working on Anthem Next. And I was just thinking, that game needs more than a small team. That game needs many employees working on it. But Lewis, a weird sort of side story to this is that according to Jason Schreier at Bloomberg, Dragon Age 4 will now strictly be a single player game after it had been designed to incorporate heavy multiplayer components. And it seems that the reason for this is due to the failure of Anthem and due to the success of Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, which was an entirely single-player game. EA seems to have soured somewhat on the live service model. And the decision to make Dragon Age 4 a service game was also what apparently caused creative director Mike Laidlaw to leave BioWare after 14 years as well, just showing how obviously bad a decision that would have been. Yeah, it's just incredible, but technically a step in the right direction for EA, I guess.
Yeah, it's good to see that they can learn from their mistakes, which they've, made.
Well, let's hold off on that just yet.
We're seeing here that they have looked at the Anthem situation and realised that the problem was the model. It wasn't the IP. Because it'd be very easy to look at those two games, Anthem and Jedi Fallen Order, and say one succeeded because it's Star Wars and the other didn't because it was new. And you could see a company like EA doubling down on established IP because of that. But
I think because of Battlefront 2, Lewis, I think that they cannot claim that Star Wars just succeeds because of its IP.
Exactly. So again, they've learned from that mistake as well. They've pulled back on some of the microtransaction nonsense that they were doing. They are trying to give players what they want and what they're fucking asking for, which, that has got to be a good sign. But it's a shame it came at the cost of Anthem to learn that lesson.
Absolutely. Yeah, one of those games succeeded because it was a good game, and one of those games failed because it was a bad game. It's as cut and dry as that, as far as I'm concerned. However, Lewis, EA, true to form, have also cancelled another project codenamed Gaia, which apparently had been in the work for 6 years. Originally, this was worked on by Jade Raymond, who is subsequently 2 jobs down the line, so far as I can work out from when she initially started working on this. It is that old. And it seems that the game's cancellation was basically mismanagement by EA. The game was reportedly rebooted in 2018, and apparently that wasn't even good enough to save it. So, I mean, hold off on too much praise on EA just yet, is all I'm saying.
Fair enough.
Alright, Lewis, news item number 4. The E3 live event has been cancelled according to documents from the Board of Los Angeles Conventions and Tourism. To be clear, E3 as an event hasn't been cancelled. The live part of E3 has been cancelled. Because I think there might have been a little confusion about this online. Last month, the ESA had outlined a plan for a digital-focused show, but a live or hybrid event had not been ruled out at that time, but now it has. Apparently, there is also potential for a license to be granted to the ESA for a return in 2022 and 2023. The ESA has not yet made a statement on this as we are recording now. I actually think that too much of a big deal was made about this online. Like, there was E3 live cancelled like all over the place, it felt like. And I don't know about you, but I didn't seriously feel as if there was going to be a live event in 2021 at all, particularly because of the COVID situation, which is still going on in the US.
Yeah.
That is not a dig to any Americans still listening, because it was as bad here, if not worse, at several points, but nonetheless it is still quite bad over there, and I don't know how anyone had any expectations of this.
Yeah, I would not expect us to have live events, certainly not of that scale in this country in June, never mind in the States, and we have, you know, a really rapid vaccination program going on. So yeah, I had no expectation. I think event organisers, quite rightly in some cases, are planning for hybrid events. You sort of have to, in a way, because you don't know how things are going to change, but you plan that until the moment where it's definite you can't do it, and then you stop planning it, and that sounds like what's happened here. Yeah,
exactly. However, I do think that the ESA has to come out and tell us what this event is soon, because I don't think it's going to be anything like E3s of old. Big publishers like PlayStation and Ubisoft and Nintendo specifically for a long time, have been doing showcases of their own. Even Microsoft now are doing showcases of their own, who were like the last guardian for E3 basically, weren't they? And Bethesda won't be there now either, because they're obviously part of Microsoft. They've still got Summer Games Fest going on as well over the same time, I assume. Just right now, I just don't know what E3 is, Lewis. That's basically what it comes down to. I'm totally willing to be sold on something, but the ESA has to come out and tell us what it's going to be and why it's going to be awesome. Because right now, I genuinely think that the negativity around the ESA and E3 is plenty justified.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, there's no need to be too negative until we know more about what that show is, but they should be looking at those headlines, as you were saying. If people are reading into it, the E3 in its totality is cancelled, they need to nip that in the bud, and the best way to do that is to come out and share some plans. It might not be the entire thing, because it might not all be locked down yet, but at least give us a sense of, yep, it's going to be 5 days of big live streams that will be followed up with loads of gameplay sessions. You know, pretty similar to what it's been in the past, but just all online. That is all it would take, and people would be like, cool, I'm up for that. I want to see what that's going to involve, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And more importantly, I think they have to tell us who's involved in this as well. Like, I think that is a huge selling point of E3 as well, obviously. Alright, Lewis, finishing off as we always do with a couple of shout outs. First podcast of the month, and that means free games, Lewis. On PlayStation Plus, you really are getting a stellar lineup this month. You're getting Final Fantasy VII Remake, Farpoint VR, Marquette, Remnant from the Ashes, and as part of the PlayStation Stay at Home initiative, anyone with a PlayStation can get Ratchet & Clank 2016 for free. You don't even need to have a PlayStation Plus account or anything. You can just get that for free. Really, really fantastic offer from PlayStation this month. For God's sake, get Final Fantasy VII Remake. It doesn't matter who you are listening to this. Even if you don't think that you will like Final Fantasy VII Remake, just play it anyway. Yeah, it's free. Just go and do it.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to playing a bit of Maquette as well. That's been an interesting little puzzler that's been on my radar for a while. And again, great just to see that coming out free for PlayStation. So I'll be jumping into that pretty soon.
Absolutely, man. On Xbox Games with Gold, you're getting Warface Breakout, Vicious Attack Llama Apocalypse, Metal Slug 3, and Port Royale 3. I mean, it's not great competition, is it? Let's be honest. Microsoft either have to start putting more effort into this or just can it. They have to just be like, right, this is obviously pointless.
Yeah.
Everyone's signing up for Games Pass. This part of our business is now pointless. Let's just throw in the towel here, you know? Oh my God. Also, just as a quick side note, coming out of PlayStation today, only a few hours ago as well, PlayStation have discontinued selling and renting TV shows and movies on PSN. However, if you have bought TV shows or movies on PSN, you can still view them, but you just won't be able to buy any more. To be honest with you, this predates the rise of streaming services, and even Apple TV and stuff like that's on it now as well. Yeah. Amazon Prime. There is no need for this service, really, and I highly doubt it will impact many people.
No, exactly. It's a sign of the times. There's no need for it at all.
Alright, let's shout out number 2. Bravely Default has come out this week and quite frankly has reviewed better than I thought that it might. It's currently sitting at a perfectly okay 77 on Metacritic, but to be honest with you, after having had played the demo, I honestly thought this game could have been an absolute fucking disaster. I really genuinely did. This game is absolutely not for me, despite being a JRPG and ticking a lot of the boxes you would have thought I would have liked, but it is absolutely not for me. I have to apologise on behalf of my entire country for the character in this game with the most grating Scottish accent I have ever experienced in my fucking life, Lewis. It is so bad. But I am very glad that the game is a good enough showing for the people out there that want to play it. Alright, shout out number 3. A new Alien game has been announced, again, literally just a few hours ago, Lewis. It is a co-op shooter about surviving a xenomorph attack, and it's called Aliens Firestorm. It will apparently play a lot like Left 4 Dead. Lewis, you are a big fan of Alien Isolation, the last Aliens game. In a lot of ways, this is the total opposite of Alien Isolation. Still a survival game, but Alien Isolation obviously a lot to do with sneaking around, getting away from a xenomorph. You don't have a lot of weapons, and this you are absolutely decked out with more guns than it looks as if you know what to do with. You have a team and you're killing waves of xenomorphs. You know what I mean? Two very different styles of survival here. Do you have any interest in this at all?
I mean, not massively, because of the type of game that it is. Yeah, I mean, it looks and has been described as basically Left 4 Dead done in the Alien universe. I think it looks impressive enough. I know other fans of the Alien or Aliens franchise will be wary probably because, Aliens Colonial Marines was a huge flop back in the day, huge inflated expectations, and obviously this is a similar kind of idea, but I think it looks good. The little bits that we've seen from it, from this announcement trailer and some of the stills that have been put out, look great. I think there's more gameplay footage due to come later in the week, so one to keep an eye out for if you're interested in this at all. For me, that kind of stealth horror vibe of Alien Isolation worked so well, but it's effectively, if you like Aliens more than you liked Alien in movie terms, this is going to be a game for you,
Very nicely put there, Lewis. Very nicely put there indeed. I think that Left 4 Dead Aliens, that sentence alone is going to appeal to a lot of people,
Yeah.
Alright, and final shout out number 4. CD Projekt Red will no longer be releasing their long-awaited patch 1.2 for Cyberpunk 2077 in February, obviously because we're now in March, and will instead be releasing it in the second half of March. They say this is because of the recent cyber attack on their IT. CD Projekt Red have made this statement on Twitter.
While we dearly wanted to deliver patch 1.2 for Cyberpunk 2077 in the time span we detailed previously, the recent cyber attack on the studio's IT infrastructure and extensive scope of the update mean this unfortunately will not happen. We'll need some additional time. Our goal for patch 1.2 goes beyond any of our previous updates. We've been working on numerous overall quality improvements and fixes, and we still have work to do to make sure that's what you get. With that in mind, we're now aiming for release in the second half of March. It's not the news we enjoy sharing, but we want to make sure we launch this update properly. Stay tuned for more information as the time draws closer. Thank you for your continued patience and support.
Although it doesn't say it in those statements, Jason Schreier, again, over at Bloomberg, reports that because of the hack, the devs, who are obviously working from home remotely just now, have been locked out of their workstations for 2 weeks apparently because of the cyber attack, which just means absolutely no work had been done at all, clearly. It's just one thing after another for CDPR these days, really, isn't it? I sort of feel a little tiny bit sorry for them in this situation. Obviously, not too sorry for them because they should never have been in this fucking situation in the first place, and the fact that they are in this situation in the first place is quite a lot of their fault. But the hack portion of this, I mean, that fucking sucks. No one deserves that, regardless of whether or not you like their game. It seems crazy that is even a sentence I need to say, but no one deserves that, and it sucks that they've not been able to get this patch out to their fans and people who want to play the game and enjoy the game the way that it should be because of this hack, you know?
Yeah, it's a messy situation. It's just, misery upon misery, really, for CD Projekt Red. But as they've said themselves, they cannot afford to put this patch out until it's actually ready. So normally we would say, take as much time as you want, but there's actually no point in releasing this until it's done, because to do so would just be a bigger fucking problem. So I think, what a shame, but just keep going, basically.
Yeah, so this is the patch that is supposed to basically make it workable, so far as I'm aware. But man, I don't know, I just have no faith that that's going to happen, unfortunately. Anyway, Lewis, time for a beer, and then we will be back with Topic of the Week. And we are back for Topic of the Week. Topic of the Week this week is our play-along of What Remains of Edith Finch. Now, Edith Finch is the second game from Ian Dallas and Giant Sparrow after The Unfinished Swan, which was our play-along game last month. The game was initially released in 2017 and published by Annapurna Interactive. The game sees you play as the titular Edith Finch, who is returning to her childhood home and writing a diary to her unborn child. The game basically chronicles how each of the Finch family came to die, as they believe their family is cursed, and how Edith came to be the last remaining one of them. The family members each get their own little vignette within the game, playable vignette within the game as you explore her childhood home, basically. Most of these are in first person, but not necessarily. Some of them are fantastical, some of them are just really, really fucking sad. Lewis, your thoughts?
Fantastical and sad, that about sums it up, I think.
Yeah, I think that could be the tagline for this entire game, is fantastical and sad.
Yeah, this game had been on my radar for a long time, Mark. I think I had owned it on PlayStation from years back. I can't remember if it was given away through PS Plus or if I just bought it at some point. No idea. I just know it's been in my library for a long time. But it's been so long since I thought about playing it and remembered why I was excited to play it that it almost felt like I was going into this sort of blind again, if you know what I mean, like newly blind. I had forgotten anything about it that had drawn me to it, and so I was going and thinking, this is a walking sim, essentially. Let's see if there's anything more to it than that. And honestly, man, so I played this on Friday night in its entirety. I sat and played it for 3 or 4 hours, whatever it was, basically without stopping. And I was totally mesmerised by it. I really, really fucking loved this game.
That's awesome, man. I'm very, very glad that you liked it. I came into replaying this game, of course. I actually played it beforehand. And interestingly, comparing these two games by Giant Sparrow, The Unfinished Swan, which you could not get me to shut up about how much I loved it, and Edith Finch, I think that Edith Finch has an amazing reputation in the indie space and in video games in general. It has a fantastic reputation as a brilliant game. And The Unfinished Swan doesn't. Basically, it is completely underrated in my opinion. And I think that my opinion of Edith Finch was that it was overrated, and my opinion of The Unfinished Swan was that it was underrated. However, having played it again now, played it through the week just now as well, again, I played it in one sitting as well. It didn't take me quite as long as 4 hours. I think I was about 2.5. Man, it's really great. It's really rated, Lewis. It's rated perfectly. It is a very, very, very good video game. It really, really is. It deserved all the awards that it got, and it is fantastic. I don't really know why, after that first time playing it, that I was a little bit down on it, I suppose. But wow. It really is a fantastic experience playing this game.
I was
and an
say,
experience it definitely is.
I'm not sure what there is to be too down about, because
I mean, you could easily say it's quite pretentious. It's quite slow.
Well,
but at the same time, none of that really matters in the spectrum of what the game is doing. And I think that both in The Unfinished Swan and in What Remains of Edith Finch, they both have these fantastic magical realism moments in them that are just so fucking fantastic. And it's something I really respond very, very well to. And I don't know if I just sort of shoved that to the back of my mind. It was nothing that I really thought about it when we were going to play this game. Like, it's not something I was thinking about, oh, it's a bit magical and it's a bit fantastical, as I said at the beginning here, but It really is. It really is, and it tells these fantastically weird and brilliant and tragic stories throughout the game. You know, it really is amazing.
I think that's the thing. Like, to narrow in on some of these moments, I hadn't really been expecting any of that, any of the what turns out to be the core gameplay, like effectively what the whole game is. When starting it, you begin the game playing as Edith, and you're moving up towards the house, and you're getting that, you know, quite nicely done text overlaying the landscape, so that, you know, and the camera's tracking to various points just to keep you moving.
Yeah, so the text of the game is narrated to you as you walk around the levels, and the captions of that text are presented to you within the game world as well. It's actually a really nice way of doing things, I think, anyway. It's a really nice way of narrating a story to you. It feels like a sort of evolution of Gone Home.
Exactly.
Actually, it feels like you're not finding things as much. Like, there's a lot less exploration, I suppose. It's a very linear path in reality that you take through Edith Finch. But at the same time, I actually think that the story is probably told better, or certainly I thought it was. I certainly responded to it better. I don't know, not saying that Gone Home was bad, it's just that I feel as if this is the next step to that,
exactly that. I think that's so spot on. This game feels like Gone Home.
Oh, yeah.
You can feel Gone Home in it. It's absolutely influenced it is in its tone and spirit and everything about it. But this does feel like an evolution there. And I would say, you know, if anyone hasn't played this and has played Gone Home, or played Gone Home and bounced off it because they weren't sure about it, I think this is really worth giving a go to, because it is a bit of a growth of that formula. I was quite nervous in that first hour. As I say, that your hour probably is a bit longer than it actually took, but when you're going around as Edith and it doesn't really feel like much is happening, you're getting these little story overlays as she's trying to find her way into the home and work out what the key that she's been given is there to unlock. And at that moment, it does feel very Gone Home. You're just a young woman walking around a house and you're being told things. And I was like, this is fine, but
I mean, 100%. I mean, you could have easily described Gone Home in that sense.
Exactly.
Like,
and at that moment, I was a bit like, oh, is this all there's going to be? Like, it better be a really good story if this is what it is. But that is not what this is at all. To me, so this idea of the vignette, so for anyone who hasn't played, just really briefly, there's like, whatever there are, 7, 8, 9, something like that, family members whose memories essentially you dive into by reading their last diary entry or finding some object which connects to their death.
Exactly, yeah.
They're so differently presented. They range from, like you say, really raw, emotional, hyper-real moments to Barbara's story, which is presented totally as this pulpy horror comic that you kind of get to play with. And the inventiveness, Mark, across the board here, every single vignette was totally different. They told stories in a different way. Some of them were really hysterically funny, even though they're all about death. The one that it was one of the first ones, so it totally took my breath away, and probably was the moment where I went, oh, this game has something, which was Calvin's story, which is just this really short little piece where you're playing first person as Calvin, a young boy on a swing in his back garden, and you're just trying harder and harder to do the classic loop, try and go over the bar and whatever that might mean. And you're getting narration from his brother who was witnessing this, and you know as the player what is going to happen. You know this boy is dead and he's not leaving this scene. And just the way, the quiet narration slowly builds and you get more and more of that dramatic tension. When you pull out of that and you're back in Edith's shoes, I put my controller down for a minute and I was just like, holy fuck, this is unreal. And each story in their different way just did that for me. There was so many moments like that all across it. I mean, I could go on about each single vignette. I just loved the way it was presented. I think it's such an interesting way of doing a narrative-driven game, to give you little episodes like that play differently, because that's what life feels like, to vary it like that. I thought it was genius.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's some real dark shit that is happening here, though. I mean, not want to dive too much into it, to be honest with you, but a very young infant drowns in a bath in this game, and you see that from a first-person perspective. But it's done in such a way that it never feels like that's what's happening necessarily. Like, the magic of I don't mean like some concept of magic, I mean the literal magic that's happening in the moment. It sort of somehow makes that okay. Like, it didn't feel, oh my god, like I'm broken inside because I've just fucking had to play as an infant who's died. And again, like you were talking about Calvin, and Calvin couldn't have been any more than, what, 8?
I think he's meant to be about 10, something like that,
Yeah, so these are like kids that you are playing in their final moments, basically. You're playing in everyone's final moment. That's sort of the point. I honestly think that the one that hit me hardest was Lewis's Not our Lewis, ladies and gentlemen, not PlayerStoo, Lewis here, Lewis Finch, who basically had a monotonous job and mental health issues, and his job was just to cut the heads off fish at a cannery, and he loses himself into this fictitious world that he's made, and then you end up playing a moment, I think it's supposed to be like as his mum, who you just see him, and he's one of the few characters in the whole game that you see at all. And he's just doing the repetitive motion of what he would do to move the fish from the left hand side of his tray to the right hand side of his tray to cut it off, but there's like no fish there, and it was just like a really I don't know why that one got me so much. That was just like absolutely brutal, and eventually it turns out that he committed suicide, and that was Edith's brother, and he was like the cool one and whatever, you know.
Yeah, he was sort of the gamer of the whole family as well.
He was, he was the fucking gaming stoner. That was, was like his background, wasn't he? That one, for whatever reason, that got to me more than the infant drowning in a bathtub. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because that one was done quite seriously, and you were like, oh well, this guy's had a breakdown and has killed himself. Whereas the incident where a fucking infant drowning in a bath was done in such a fantastical way, that the way that this game deals with death is incredibly well done. Yeah, incredibly well done.
Yeah, it approaches death with like an openness and an honesty about it that it can be tragic, but it can be super weird, and it can be funny in a way. Like the character, I think it was Sam, who dies by just falling off a cliff at the wrong moment. Like it just punctures itself at all these different points. It creates this mood and this atmosphere of, I don't know, like nostalgia and everything that's kind of wrapped up in, you know. Again, like Gone Home, you have that sensation of having done this kind of thing yourself. You know, you've gone back to a place that meant something to you. You've tried to work out what's been going on. You have all these family connections that you're constantly in your own head dealing with in different ways. And this game just kind of lets you explore some of that, and it just creates some fascinating experiences and some fascinating moments. You know, there's Walter's story, who he so traumatized by his, I think it's his sister's death, sort of retreats into a bunker under this house. This, by the way, we've barely spoken about the house. The house is incredible. There's this bizarre, sprawling, climbing tower-like structure. It doesn't make any sense. It couldn't exist in reality. But you find Walter down in the bunker, and he has this one brief moment of getting out into the world, and then smashed by a goddamn train. You know?
Yeah.
I thought it just touched on so many things so well. It had some just beautiful storytelling. It never outstayed its welcome. Honestly, even the callback to the unfinished Swan was
I was just going to ask you about it.
So unexpected.
Just going to ask you about it.
So again, I screen grabbed that moment. You basically turn a corner or whatever, and you see what is effectively the sort of logo of that game. It is more than just an Easter egg. There's an actual potential crossover there, which, when you start to think again about the position that Edith is in, you as the player is in, that you're at that moment looking at the death or disappearance of your brother, and it means so much to you, the gamer on the couch who has the wider knowledge. But to her, it must have been so bizarre as well to go through all this stuff. It just made your head sit in interesting spaces, which I don't think games often explore super well. And I'm really thankful to have played it for that.
It is quite an experience playing What Remains of Edith Finch, I've got to say.
Yeah.
Or should I say it's an incredible series of experiences,
exactly,
I suppose.
Yeah.
I have to admit that I hadn't played Unfinished Swan by the time I'd played What Remains of Edith Finch. I think I'd played What Remains of Edith Finch before Unfinished Swan, and hadn't appreciated that tie-in until I went back and played it this time, and there's so much there in a sort of freaky, oblique sort of way, but also in a very direct way, I suppose, but in terms of what happened to Edith's brother. Yeah, it's so weird and interesting at the same time, you know what I mean? It makes you want to know more about that, you know?
I think that stands for the whole game. Like the game just makes you want to know as much as you can about these people, and a bit like happened in Gone Home. I think that is just such a great experience to have in games when you're so drawn into what is, you know, ostensibly real people's lives, that you want to know more about them. That's perfect. Yeah,
one thing I will say about this game, on my second playthrough anyway, usually with walking simulators like this, when they end, I'm just sort of like, okay, that was the end, or I'm sort of ready for them to end. They're designed to be short experiences, so I'm not saying that in any sort of negative way at all. Like, I'm really genuinely not. However, when What Remains of Edith Finch ended, I was sort of like, oh, that's it. It's over now. I would have gladly went on for hours and hours and hours more. You know, I would have gladly went on, which I think is a real testament to just how enthralling all these little vignettes and the characters that have been drawn together in this weird ass fucking house, you know. It really is fantastic. I am ashamed to say that I thought it was underrated at any point, because it's not. It's an absolutely fucking brilliant video game. It really is.
Yeah, absolutely adored it. I would recommend it to anyone. If you like narratives in video games, if you like storytelling at all, give this a go.
All right, Liz, I think we'll have to call it a day there, but that also means we have to announce our next play-along game for this month, which is Oxenfree by Night School Studios. If you have been at all interested in indie games in your gaming life, I'm sure that you must have stumbled across Oxenfree at some point, and as have I, but I have never played it, and I actually don't know a huge amount about the game, which means that I'm going in a bit blind here, and I'm quite excited about that, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. Another one for me that's been on the list for a long, long time. One of the first kind of indie games that really caught my attention a good few years ago. But yeah, I've never played it, so I'm really looking forward to seeing what it's all about. Yeah,
absolutely. And right now, ladies and gentlemen, it is 79 pence on the PlayStation Store. I've not checked on Xbox or Steam or whatever, but if you have a PlayStation, it is 79 pence, and there is absolutely no excuse not to play along with us. The game is around 5 hours long, it looks like, something like that. And for 79 pence, for fuck's sake, even if you don't like it, Jesus, were you even going to notice that you missed that money?
Yeah, that deal runs out on the 10th of March, so make sure and grab it before then. Play along with us, it'd be great to know what you think of it.
Absolutely. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to remind everyone that you can find PlayersToo on all the social media. That's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com. That's PlayerSToo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, it really, really, really helps us out. I know I say this twice a week, every week, but it does not become less important on a weekly basis. And thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. It genuinely does mean a lot. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next week.
Thanks.